It's great to be catching up with Livestock SA CEO Travis Tobin. Travis, how are you going today?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ricky.
Now, you've been a few months into the role now. How have you found it settling in to the new position?
Yeah, good. It's there's a lot of challenges as always, and we've sort of had some increased challenges around biosecurity lately, which I guess we'll talk about in a minute. But no, it's good to start to get to understand the business more and the membership and the things that we can do to help drive the cattle, sheep and goat industries forward in South Australia.
And you've got some experience in that area as well. I think we're in those sort of livestock representative bodies from interstate. You were with the Cattle Council at one stage as well?
Yeah, that's right. I was with Cattle Council for a few years immediately before here, and also was the CEO of the Queensland Farmers Federation prior to that. So, sort of a more state-based role like this one, whereas the Cattle Council role is obviously a national role.
Yeah, and nationally and with those organisations you've mentioned and others, we've regularly heard about biosecurity and being ready for threats. And whilst we've had varroa mite and Japanese encephalitis and various things to deal with now, foot and mouth disease is really front of mind, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, it is. And it's because it is such a highly contagious and a serious livestock disease. So not only does it affect cattle, sheep and goats, that we represent, but it's also the other cloven hoof species, such as deer, camels, buffalo, etc. So, the threat is quite concerning. We haven't had a case of FMD in Australia for 150 years, and we want to keep it that way, but obviously things change, and with recent developments in Indonesia, there's a heightened sort of vigilance around that, I suppose.
Yeah, that heightened vigilance is possibly a reason why there have been detections of traces, and I think that's probably important to clarify. The detection activities found that it's in product that maybe has come into supermarkets, but there's no indication as at Thursday, the 21st of July, that it's in our herd or in our animals in any case at this point in time.
No, that's right. We remain FMD-free, and we know that those disease-free status provides us a lot of advantages in a marketing context, so it gets us into the high markets and enables us to command premium prices for our products. So what we've seen in the last couple of days in Melbourne, etc., with the interception of fragments of FMD, and it was also ASF, so African swine fever in pork products. That's sort of part of routine screening that happens all the time. So in some ways, it reminds us that we do need to continue to be vigilant, but it also reminds us that the system works. But that said, as risks change over time, we need to change the system to confront them. And that's some of the things that we've seen.
And speaking of changing, I guess, as the threats emerged, the New South Wales Primary Industries Minister took a policy to the recent Agriculture Ministers meeting about adding electronic identification for sheep and goats. That, I understand, has passed unanimously from all the agriculture ministers. What's that going to mean on the ground for our farmers in South Australia?
Well, I guess it's been a little bit inevitable in some ways because it's been nationally through National Biosecurity Committee, etc. That's sort of been discussed for the past 4 or 5 years, and a position has been that we transition to that. So what it means for us in South Australia is, okay, if that is where we're going, how do we do that in the best possible way that producers and our supply chains can adapt to it as effectively as possible, and we don't wear unnecessary cost burdens. We have a system that's fit for purpose, those sorts of things. So we, as a Livestock SA, are actually doing some work around that now, and we've recently formed a steering committee to head that work up, but that's exactly about that. So how do we prepare for the implementation of mandating electronic identification in sheep and goats, and what do we need to do to make that as effective as possible?
Is that part of the framework, or is it related to this sort of concept? We hear a lot more about it from Victoria, for instance, about traceability when it comes to livestock, not just on a biosecurity front, but also sort of origin and how the animals have been handled back at their source?
Yeah, it obviously has a biosecurity benefit, but it also has a marketing benefit. So there's the provenance issues that you can prove from a marketing context, but obviously the biosecurity element is around being able to accurately and quickly trace animals through a supply chain. So when an incident such as, say, FMD or lumpy skin disease in cattle, which is also quite front of mind in Indonesia at the moment, it means that if we do happen to get those exotic diseases here, we can quickly identify where the point sources are and contain the diseases, and then ideally eradicate them as quickly as possible and get back to business as usual from a trade perspective.
There's a whole lot more we can talk about, say, the dog fence at another stage and making sure that's up to scratch. But I did want to mention before we go, the Growing SA conference. You've partnered with Grain Producers SA to put this on the 29th and 30th of August at Hahndorf.
Yeah, that's right, Ricky. We've had a couple of years in the wilderness, like everyone, with COVID, but it's back this year and excuse the pun, but bigger and better than ever. So, it's back this year, and we really hope producers will get along and support it. We think it's a pretty good program. It's obviously focused around sustainability, but there's a lot of things there that producers can come along, have a listen, engage in discussion, ask questions, and I'm sure there'll be things they can take away that will enhance their businesses' profitability and longer-term sustainability.
I guess for farmers to get the extra value out of the trip the day before, your Livestock SA, you've got your annual conference happening as well.
Annual general meetings the day before, for both Livestock SA and Grain Producers SA. So, AGMs the day before. And that night there's a dinner as well where Mark Bickley will be the guest speaker for the dinner. So that should be good too.
Well, I think you've given us an exclusive there. I knew that was possibly in the works, but apparently that's going to be a thing. Is that right?
Hopefully it's an exclusive. My understanding was, that's who we're engaging.
Yeah. All right, Travis Tobin from Livestock SA. Great to have you with us today, and we look forward, if we don't see you before, at Hahndorf.
No worries, Ricky.